Today is Saraswati Puja. It's also Ash Wednesday for the Catholics, and then of course we know it's Valentine's Day. So let us begin with a prayer. Om Satyena Labhyastapasa Hyesatma Samyagyanena Brahmacharyena Nicham Antaha Sharirehi Jyotir Mayohi Shubraha Yam Pashanti Yatayaha Kshinadoshaha Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. The Atman, the indivisible self in all beings, is realized by veracity, austerity, right knowledge, and self-control, moderation, all constantly practiced for a very long time. When the impurities of the mind dissolve due to this practice, the seer beholds it everywhere and in everything, even here in this body, life, and mind. Om, peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us. May peace be unto all living beings. Om, Hari Om Tat Sat. Aim Gurubhyo Namaha. So, last time we met, we worked on the verse having to do with the three transformations of consciousness in yoga. And we've been through all of it. I think it almost took us two sessions. But at the end, we took a dive deeper into this idea of Nirodha Parinama. And what this class will be focused on is what is required to attain that state of the transformation of restraint in consciousness. So let me just show a chart here real quick. Kind of show you where we're going today. If there's time, we'll move on to the 10th verse because it works really, really well with the teachings we're going to have tonight, and works very well with the verse number 9. So those three obstacles of self-realization that we looked at were the sense of ownership, the sense of agency, and the sense of separation. And our poet took up the three transformations of consciousness, which are Nirodha Parinama, Samadhi Parinama, and Ekagra Parinama. And so these are transformations of mind dealing with restraint first, and then samadhi, and then finally one-pointedness. And as it falls in the Yoga Sutras, in the third, I believe it's, yes, the third pada, it's actually showing us the dynamics of samyama, dharana, or concentration, meditation, or dhyan, and samadhi, or absorption. So we looked at all of that. And then, as I said, we did a focus into detachment. Now, let's back up and think about what it takes to get to a concentrated state of mind. I think that there's quite a few practitioners these days who think that when they sit down for meditation, that they're meditating. And, maybe it's just an informal thing to say, oh, I sat for meditation today. Maybe saying I sat for it, but didn't attain it is more accurate for many of us. But we might think that then, okay, I'm concentrating. But if we find ourselves thinking, I'm trying to concentrate, then that in itself is this stage of pratyahara. And pratyahara is that fifth limb of yoga that we need to accomplish if we're going to get to a one-pointed state of mind, a concentrated state of mind. And so it's very useful to, and I'm not sure if I showed this last time, but let's take a quick look at this chart. The 5 states of the mind field. And basically, we all know about the disturbed state, and we know about the lethargic state, right? So this vikshipta state is, on again, off again, focused, let's say. Let's save that word concentration for something more concentrated. And so we experience balance and we get stripped of our balance and we're drawn away by habit. And this gives rise to the 9 vikshepas. So that's something else we're going to look at some more. It's a chart that Babaji brings out a lot. And we're going to look at it again tonight. So when we're trying to attain pratyahara, we're trying to get out of this distracted state into ekagra. And yeah, so this restraint, if we want to have this transformation of restraint, we have to look deeply into various, it's like teasing apart what is renunciation, what is detachment. And so we're going to pull up yet another chart here. I should have just switched over to it. And it is called the Aparavairagya and Paravairagya, or in other words, the 4 steps to detachment. We're going to take this in two paths. So let's take a look first at this initial self-effort, yatamana. It includes in itself, like if we, and let me share with you that this is in Footfalls. It's the chart on page 698. And the commentary on it is really, really helpful. One of the things, yeah, I'm sorry, I was thinking ahead to a different chart. Okay, so this is all about discrimination in the beginning, and it's our initial self-effort. It's a strong resolve to uncover the real and the unreal, and an unrelenting effort to free the mind from sense objects, right? That sounds like pratyahara, doesn't it? Withdrawing the senses from the objects and the mind from the thought of objects. So that, I like that word, unrelenting effort to free the mind from sense objects. So this is, on our day to day, as we go about our life, it is making sure that we're not giving way to attachment. And in our practice, it's that we're able to set it all aside. The next item in this is ending craving by observing the world and the body. And so this, as I was preparing for this class, I was realizing that we need to understand the difference between craving and just simple desire. And so I had a conversation with Babaji about that. He said that the difference between craving and desire is that craving, of course, is the result of desire, but it's where desire gets intensified and it starts settling into obsession within the mind. And he cited the Buddhist teaching of the nidanas, the 12 links, and Krishna's 9-fold road to ruination, which is always a good teaching to bring up. Brooding, and here it is, brooding on the sense objects, one develops attachment to them. And from attachment comes desire. From desire, anger sprouts forth. So if we've reached that point where if our desire for something is thwarted and anger comes up, we know that it's entering into this realm of craving. From anger proceeds delusion, and from delusion, confused memory. From confused memory, the ruin of reason. And due to the ruin of reason, he perishes. And in a sense, this is another listing, like we're going to see here, of these 9 vikshepas. and we'll get to this in a minute. So we're to end craving by observing the world and the body. So by observing the world, we see that nothing is permanent. Looking at the body, nothing is permanent. We cannot make it our home. There's this teaching in the beginning that, everybody wants to rush to iti, all this, all this is God. But in the beginning, if we're getting complacent and cozy in this life, then we have to keep reminding ourselves it's not going to last. There's health now, there's illness later, there's happiness now, there's sorrow later. And so, this is looking squarely at the issue of suffering. And it shows up how, falsely identifying with what is the seen instead of remaining as the seer uh, is is the source of all our problems. That's, ignorance. It's the first klesha, and all the others come out of it. It's the first obstacle. Um, yeah, so without doing this, it's sort of like covering a carcass with roses. I believe Swami Vivekananda used that expression, to think that there can be a good world out there without any bad. And I know none of us here do that, but um, it still needs to be stated. So, so we're also to look at the body. There's this practice of always keeping in mind the evils of bodily existence, quote unquote, the evils. Well, what that really means is the limitations. There's pain and suffering. There's limitations like you have to eat, you have to sleep, you have to protect the body. And if you look out on the world, you see that everybody's doing that, and they're taking the body as the self, and they're protecting it to the extent, many people, of not being in service to other beings. So, selfishness creeps in a very big way. These are all limitations associated with the world and the body. So the next one is identifying and eliminating the vikshepas in the mind. So this shows how these particular teachings, this list, is, maybe not everyone has these to deal with. Maybe they've transcended some of them in a previous lifetime along the spiritual path. But some or all of them are probably, if we cannot bring the mind to concentration, if we can't make that hump from pratyahara to ekagra, then these are a listing of things that are uh, getting in the way. And they've created, because we have these, they're creating samskaras in the mind, and those samskaras arise, and it all boils down to desire. Yeah, as Babaji said, as we were talking about it, attachments also settle in and become negative samskaras. So then the fifth item here in this list is that we are to reduce desires, even if we are not yet able to eliminate or remove them. So let's just go through Vyatireka, the next step, which is astute ascertainment. Let's say that we have begun to gain some facility in Yatamana. And so the next step, and we're familiar, we're looking at these 9 vikshepas, and now we're going to take it a little deeper. So we're going to, in Vyatireka, we're developing the ability to discern which of the vikshepas have been corrected. And we're going to see which others are in the process of being corrected. Okay, these are things like, doubt, inattentiveness, dullness of mind. Have we been able to, are some of these still strong in the mind, or some of them still, or some of them starting to be attenuated? Overindulgence, have we been able to correct that? So we take stock of all these things, and that's why it's so great to have a list like this, uh, is so that we can go down it and see where we're at. If we're not sure of where we're at, some of us are not hard enough on ourselves, and other of us are too easy. Excuse me, I said that in reverse. Some of us are too hard on ourselves, and others are not hard enough. And this is where a teacher is so important, because he or she will help us take a look at these. So then we can ascertain which of the senses needs mastering, and ascertain what desires have not been mastered. And one of the things that Babaji says in the footfalls about this is that we're to take these desires, and he might be referring to something that Vedavyas or Patanjali says, but in any case, we're to take these desires that we have and take a look at them and see which of our senses and desires for certain objects, what sense is that particularly related to? And this helps us begin to attenuate it and step back. And so in this state, we would cull desires until only the strongest remain. Now, this isn't, when we think about, oh, I have to get rid of my desires and I have to cull these things, and but we're doing this in the process of discrimination. So, we're discriminating, why do we really want that? Look at what comes from it. When we look ahead, and this is a good thing to bring up later on, where is it? Yes, here it is. In Akendriya, we see that the contact with all things, perceptible and imperceptible, right? That might be thoughts of the mind, right? That all of them bring suffering in one way or another. Now, here we might have to just take the word of the seers that this is true. Maybe we haven't had this realization yet, but we can take a look at this, that the seers say that the contact with all things, perceptible and imperceptible, brings suffering down the line. And it might be based upon being dependent on those things or attached to those things. So we have to, use our discernment to take a look at it. So at this point, let's go ahead and take a look at before we do, just wanted to share this thought that as I was preparing for this class and I was looking at these two, Yatamana and Vyatireka, I looked at this word, the 9 vikshepas, and when I heard it, my mind went, oh, vikshepas, like vikshepa shakti. We know that there's avarana shakti, which is the power of covering the nature of reality so that there's a sense of separation. And this is the first, that covering is what gives us avidya, ignorance of our true nature. So that's avarana shakti. And then the next one is vikshepa shakti, and that's the distorting power. That's what allowed, if you don't see indivisible reality because of this covering of ignorance, then you have the opportunity to see all these different phenomena, and it all comes out of the mind, as we know. So taking this back, that first covering is unreal. Ignorance is unreal, right? And so everything that comes out of that is unreal. I don't know if I used this example last time, but it's like one of those math tests where you have to solve an equation and get the answer. And then that answer is used to solve all the other equations in the rest of the test. So if you get that first one wrong, they're all wrong. Well, so that's what's going on here. That avarana shakti is there. That ignorance, the first klesha, is there. And we've taken that ignorance to be real. And out of it comes egoism, which Patanjali says is the connection of the seer with the seen and the confusion that comes there of taking the seen to be the seer, right? So from all of that, these and what follows, attachment, aversion, and clinging to life, out of those five come these 9 vikshepas. So now let's take a look at that. Here they are. Oops, I'm sorry. Wrong chart. Here we go. So we have commentary in Footfalls, and this chart, the 9 obstacles to spiritual progress, is in Footfalls on page 255. Now, 25 years ago, is it then? Oh, no, wrong one. I'm sorry. From here, I'm pulling from the Raja Yoga class, number 23, for those who have taken the Raja Yoga series. And so I'll be using some commentary from that class. So keep remembering that these are obstacles to yoga, which means that they throw the mind into a distracted state. And so the first one, of course, is disease. And we've looked at these many times. There's the dhatus, the rasas, and the karanas, and you can see them there. And these karanas are really important because it's the active and cognitive senses in mind. These are part of the physical form. And we have, all these others. So the problem is this first part is disease pertaining to any of these. And it's important to remember what Patanjali says here, that the mind reacts to illness and gets imbalanced, threatening yogic equipoise. So we can apply diet and exercise to aid in retaining balance. And whether that works or not, japa will make one impervious. Recitation of the mantra given by the teacher in sacred ceremony. This is japa. So if things are out of whack here, one of the things that shows up is maybe a sense of complacency. Well, like Holy Mother said, she woke up one morning and she physically was feeling off, and so she let herself sleep in. Well, she was okay the next day, but she felt like sleeping in again. And so she had to talk to her mind, no, you don't need to do this, and got herself back on track. And this was when she was very young. So from these, from this problem of disease, we also get stodginess, laziness, and a certain kind of procrastination. Now, it's also true that if we wait on things that need to be done, on maintaining some semblance of spiritual practice, even, if we're slightly under the weather, that sort of thing, then it's just going to hold us back, because having the mind in a sattvic state is going to help us transcend and get over these things. So let's go down to the mental level, and let's make sure that I haven't missed anything. Yeah. Lack of perseverance. That was another way that Babaji described sthana in the Raja Yoga lessons. Lack of interest is another one. Fickleness, yeah. So you can add that to this list. So then the next one is samshaya, which is doubt, indecision, inadvertence, and uncertainty. And this is part of the mental level. As I was looking on ahead to verse 10 in the Encomium, I saw, we're going to be looking at the 9 complacencies, which is a list from Lord Kapila in the Samkhya system. And you can see that the first one that says matter, the first complacency internal is that matter will give me realization. Everything will be okay in matter. It's a comfort zone thing. It's a complacency. It's inadvertence. You can see how it comes with this. We just stay comfortable in our little nest, and it helps give rise to these things. So I see them as working together. So if we have doubt, this is really, really one of the worst things in spiritual life, because it means a lot of times that we can't take that step and step on the path. We're undecided. Is this my teacher? Is this not my teacher? Can I trust that seer? Can I not trust that seer? Will this method bring about any result? And we just stay on the fence. And one of the things that Babaji has often said is that you can't hang out in indecision and inadvertency and uncertainty. It'll kill your spiritual life. You have to just take a stand. And as soon as you do that, or very shortly thereafter, you'll discover whether it was right or not. So don't hang out. So we have to tell ourselves, we're not going to hang out in any doubt. And then, this also brings back that verse that Babaji was chanting a lot in the last few years, the one that ends in Budbuddhist cha yata jale. And it's the one that says, ignorance is unreal. Therefore, how can it create a real doubt? In other words, how can anything that comes out of ignorance be real? So doubt is one of those unreal things arising out of ignorance. So this is the kind of doubt that keeps us from going forward. There's a different kind of doubt, and I'll just mention it in case it's popping up in anyone's mind. The kind of doubt where you want to get your doubt clarified. And so you're asking questions and you're seeking an answer. But we've all heard of Tarkika Buddhi too. There's a kind of doubt that just keeps us rolling around in questions and never putting it into action, whatever it is. So the kind of doubt that leads us to take action and get answers is okay. But this kind of doubt that keeps us in inadvertence, uncertainty, and unable to move forward in our spiritual life is a problem. So then there's pramada. And this is carelessness, resistance. That's probably a really good one. You can see that there's some similarities in here. Inattentiveness. And you can see how this inattentiveness is probably hand in hand. It's hand in hand with this idea of resistance. It's easier just to stay on the surface of things. So I'll do that. It kind of gets back to those complacencies. We'll look at heedlessness. We're not listening to our teacher and to the seers or putting it into practice. We've got this resistance. So this is no good. And it's a mental thing. So we can, we're taking stock. Remember, we're looking at that, the 4 steps to real detachment. And these are the things we're taking stock of. Do I have this kind of resistance that keeps me from going forward in my spiritual life? Do I like to hang out even a little bit in superficiality? You know, when we do that, we we lose concentration. And when we lose our concentration, it's like stray arrows can come at us. So it's always good to keep the mind as concentrated in whatever you're doing, as concentrated as possible. The next one is alasya, and it's idleness, stubbornness, heaviness in the mind. You could say that it's quite related to tamas. A lot of these are, rajas and tamas in different degrees. And then avirati, immoderation, sensuality, incontinence, lack of control of the senses, so that we're wasting our energy. I always think of Nachiketas and his early dialogue with Yama, the Lord of Death, and where he's saying, "Well, I want to know what comes after you, Death. What's on the other side? Only you can tell me this." And uh, and Yama says, "No, no, 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 no. That's too hard. Even the gods have trouble with that. You don't want to know this. Here, look. Instead, I'll give you I'll give you wealth. I'll give you the pleasures that even in heaven are hard to get." Uh, and all of this stuff. And I love Nachiketas's reply, which is said, keep all of that for yourself, the dancing women, the beautiful instruments of the heavenly realms. They just wear out the senses. They waste them. And so what happens when we practice this moderation of the senses, when we only let them go out when we want them to go out, right? Then we store up energy. It's back to, again, Babaji's class series that we had last month, that as soon as we engage in our spiritual practice, which always includes self-control, that we're storing up energy. So, yeah, we have to watch that. So, let's just look at that list again, thinking of the vikshepas that we've looked at so far. Let's just go back and look at this. Identifying and eliminating the vikshepas in the mind. Okay, this is a start. Then into the second level stage of detachment. Then that one is, that stage is centered on discerning which of these antarayas have I corrected yet? Have I been able to do that? And which ones am I in the process of correcting? Have I come up with strategies to deal with these if they are habitual in my mind? And if you were at the God Blogs, the Brahman Bites session on Saturday, Babaji had this beautiful God blog that was called "Tightening the Mind." And it was taking up Holy Mother's teaching about the screw, and how if the screw is not in the wood properly, if it's skewed, then it's like the mind that's not screwed into reality properly, right? And so the mind gets imbalanced when that happens. So, and how do you make sure that the mind is tightly screwed and things aren't going out of whack, going in crooked and whatnot? You do that through attendance on holy company, following the instructions of one's guru, and studying the scriptures. All of these things are how we take the screw of the mind and put it in solidly. So anyway, then going back to our list here, one knows which of these vikshepas must be corrected in the future. So this is all very, very practical. I would say that as we get to this level of discernment, we kind of know we're beginning to see that there's an order to these things. And so then the next one is, yeah, let's go back to, uh, let's go back to the other chart now. Okay. So let's take up this Bronte Darshana, because this is really, everything is kind of pinned on this. And I forgot to go back. I forgot to look at the notes from the Raja Yoga class. Let's take a look at samshaya, doubt and indecision again. So he said in his in the Raja Yoga class, there's resistance in the practice of impressing a beneficial experience on the mind through repeated observance. It can frustrate the purpose of the aspirant by arousal of passion or by failure to attain the 6 jewels, right? And the 6 jewels are inner peace, self-control, self-settledness, forbearance, concentration, and faith. Those are the 6 jewels. One fails to pay attention and does not practice. So, I'm sorry, that was pramada. I'm sorry. Resistance in the practice of impressing a beneficial experience on the mind through repeated observance. And it can frustrate the purpose of the aspirant by arousal of passion or by failure to attain the 6 jewels. One thereby fails to pay attention and does not practice. Let's look at some shaya now, doubt and indecision. To clarify, whether what has been taught is correct, whether to apply it or not, and conflict in philosophical systems. He says it's the main adversary in the control of the vrittis. Okay, so these are just adding more nails into the coffin of each one of these things. And yes, in alasya, failure of the mind due to tamas. Avarati, it draws the mind from concentration. This avirati, immoderation, sensuality. Okay, now let's take a look here at Bronte Darshana. So this is living in illusion and mistaken notions. The confusion of philosophies wherein one views a fact as a non-fact. Okay, so you don't believe the seers here. You perceive what is not there in any entity or situation and decide against what has been taught by the guru. So in other words, there's a kind of projection going on in this kind of example that he's giving. The student, because of the Bronte Darshana in their own mind, the false seeing in their own mind, they project that onto philosophies, onto the teachings of the guru, and takes a false stand. It's not the same as doubt by any mind, by any means, but instead it's taking an erroneous stand on an issue and thinking in error. Okay, this is why this is so dangerous, because out of this, all the others also come, or our problem with the others comes. Like in the case of Gatu's, Rasas, and Karanas. So he goes on, in doubt, he compares it to doubt. It's not doubt, but instead taking an erroneous stand on an issue and thinking in error. In doubt, there is room for belief in an opposite view. Here, there is none, for the truth has been rejected outright. This, with doubt, are the two main adversaries to the nirodha of vrittis. And so this is, again, why it's so important that we spend time in holy company with our sangha, with our teacher, with the scriptures and the teachings of the great ones and their lives. Because this will clue us in. The more we're in that atmosphere, we will gain detachment. And from detachment comes eventually, the elimination of delusion. So one of the other things about that God blog that Babaji wrote for us, Tightening the Mind, is that he's talking about a balanced life. And this idea of a balanced life is taken to so many different ways today. A balanced life is about work-life balance. It's about what you eat. It's about your exercise regimen. All of this is supposed to make up a balanced life. But a balanced life starts with the mind. And if the mind, and I think I'm quoting him here, if the mind is not straightly screwed into consciousness, then troubles persist and get worse. And, for this very reason, this is why SRV has always taken up the Jnana Yoga. And that's why that's been, even though we're a 4-yoga association, working along the lines that Swami Vivekananda gave us and Sri Ramakrishna epitomized, still, given the state of people's minds in the West, or among Westernized people, we have to focus on the Jnana Yoga so that this ignorance, these wrong ideas are set right. So then what happens next? It's not that these are in order. These are just a list, and they're organized according to physical, mental, intellectual. And these next two are spiritual. And what he says in the Raja Yoga lesson about alabdha bhumi kattva, and notice that this word bhumi is there. So it has to do with realms. It's like not attaining realms, higher realms within, higher states of, actually, he goes into this. So missing the point, alabdha bhumi kattva, has to do with missing the point and disappointment in one's desire, inability to muster momentum, belief in one's limited capacity. You could actually start with that one. If we believe in that we have a limited capacity, then we're not going to put in the effort that's needed and the confidence with our effort that's needed to go deeper and deeper within. And so he says, and all of this, especially in regard to attaining the higher grounds or the realms of samadhi. So then the next one, anavasti tattvani. Here in the chart it says unsettledness, inability, stagnation, and backsliding. So we actually do make some progress, but we fall back from it. And maybe we're falling back because we still have a habit of pramada, we have a habit of avirati. Maybe there's some vestiges of that in there, and it's playing into this backsliding. So in his lesson, Babaji says, the inability to maintain progress, stagnation, gaining the higher bhumis, but falling back, also attaining some samadhi experience and becoming satisfied with that is a kind of slipping back. So, one of the stories that Sri Ramakrishna, analogies that he told, was the go forward story. And I'm sure as soon as I say that, everybody knows which one I'm talking about. But in case there's somebody here who doesn't, or anybody who might hear this down the road, there was a sadhu, there was a woodcutter, and he went out one day to get wood to sell in the market to feed his family. And on his way into the forest, he met a sadhu, and the sadhu just said to him, "Go forward." And so that made an impression on his mind. So he did. He went deeper into the forest that day, and he found a sandalwood tree. And so taking that wood and selling it, it set him in a very good financial situation. Then the next time he went, okay, so that's like attaining a boomi, right? Uh, Now he could just rest on his laurels, okay, and use that money until it's used up, uh, and not and then just go back to wood. If he didn't impress that experience on himself, on his mind. Anyway, but he does go back into the forest, and he remembers what the sadhu said. And he said he didn't say go to find a sandalwood tree. He said he just said go forward. So he went further forward. And this time he found a silver mine. And now you know the rest of the story. He's going to find a silver mine, but not complacent with that. He goes further the next time, and he goes to a gold mine, and he finds diamonds. Maybe he sees a platinum mine, etc. So the whole idea is that we don't stop. We go forward, and we don't stop till the goal is reached, as they say. So, yeah, let's now go back to these. And we're going to look at akendriya now. Oh, wait a minute. Did we do these? Okay, so ascertaining, well, back to Vyatireka. Ascertaining next which of the senses need mastering, and ascertaining what desires have not been mastered. And we did talk about that a little while ago, about how we want to connect desires to particular senses so that we're not staying vague about it, and we can take action in our mind around it. And then culling desires until only the strongest remain. So then we move on to akendriya. And here's where we're employing specialized disciplines pertaining to mind. And we're seeing that we read this before, seeing that contact with all things, perceptible and imperceptible, brings suffering. This would be a meditation, a contemplation we want to have frequently until we really understand it and can, talk to ourselves about it. Sometimes I find it useful, like to try and explain, as if I'm trying to explain something to others, to go deeper in my own understanding about it. And then if we're not sure about it, we can consult the scriptures, consult our teacher, of course. Then increasing dispassion until the mind has become impervious to the whims of the senses. Now, this can all sound a little bit dry, but again, just want to reinforce that as we're doing this, we're freeing the mind. We're freeing the mind to become more calm, to be more balanced, more peaceful, and we should be reaching a place where we're delighting in it. We can compare it to, starting an exercise regimen. And in the beginning, you have a lot of resistance. And then as your muscles adjust and get stronger, then you begin to take delight in their capacity to do whatever it is you want them to do. Well, it's the same thing with the mind. So as we've been going through the stage of yatamana and vyatireka, now we're into akendriya. We should begin to feel more strength in our mind, more more confidence. And so this idea of giving up desire and increasing our dispassion should, at this stage, we're going to like the idea. Okay. So just know that these are things we're going to want to do. Because as we do it, it's like we're getting freed up within. And then the final stage, and let me read this quote first because it will make this fourth stage look wonderful. To have vairagya, renunciation, is to be free of raga, attachment to distortions which pleasure imprints upon the mind. Okay, let's dwell on that for a minute. To be free of raga, desire, attachment to distortion which pleasure imprints upon the mind. Mere indifference, Vaitrishna, is not enough. Vashikara is the essence of vairagya. And this reminds me that there's I don't know why it's so hard to find. There it is. I wanted to read this quote up here at the top of the 9 obstacles chart because it encapsulates so much. Beings suffer via bondage to pleasure due to performing actions because of attraction and aversion to matters they have assumed to be accurate based upon unstable vrittis of the mind. So first comes that ignorance, right? The covering over the nature of reality. And then we have this sense of separation. We mistake the ego to be the self and lose our place as the witness. This ego then identifies also with the intellect and with the mind and with the senses, and we get further and further away. So, and then, the senses want to go outward, the mind just follows it. So beings suffer via bondage to pleasure. We think those things are giving us pleasure due to performing actions because of attraction and aversion. We've lost our witness. So we think that these things are going to make us happy, right? So by performing actions based upon attraction and aversion to matters that we've assumed to be accurate based upon unstable vrittis of the mind. So these vrittis, these waves of the mind are, all those different obstacles right here that we're talking about. These are waves. Wrong knowledge, memory, things coming out of memory. All of these are unstable vrittis of the mind. As soon as they come up, we take them to be real. So it's a very powerful statement. It really encapsulates the whole issue of those 5 kleshas and how they give rise to these 9 obstacles. Okay, so now let's look at Vashikara. Here's where we have attained to full control and mastery, meaning it's a state devoid of what is acceptable and what is rejectable. Okay, so we are no more fooled by the vrittis of the mind throwing up things that earlier we would have thought, oh, let's go do that, or let's go have that, let's go enjoy that. We're not interested. And that's the next one. It's a state of complete disinterest in enjoyment and a state that naturally perceives spirit distinct from matter. The ongoing abidance of fully matured detachment. And of course, we have to remember in all of this that when one reaches such a state, then they're starting to abide in the self and they are abiding in continuous peace of mind. Nothing can fluster them. So it's beautiful, it's blissful. And we just have to look at, you know, Vivekananda, Sri Ramakrishna, Holy Mother, our teacher. Uh, this full control and mastery is to be attained. So what are the obstacles? Oh, we've got 3 minutes left. Let's just take a jump to Paravairagya. These are the 3 conditions of Paravairagya. The obstacles, we've kind of, in one way or another, discussed it through the 9 obstacles. So what are the 3 conditions before we have absolute and supreme renunciation? All achievements, great or small, apparent or subtle, have been gained. All plagues, afflictions, and disquietude have been destroyed or transcended. The cycle of birth and death in the worlds of name and form has been eradicated. So those are the three conditions of Vairagya. And again, you know, we look at the seers and what we know of their lives. We look at the direct disciples, we look at our ideals, and we see this in them. We look at our teacher and we see abiding peace. So let's close with Vedavyasa's quote: "They who perceive the limitations and imperfections in mind and world have gained dispassion. The one whose intellect, however, is filled with discriminating wisdom won by devout practice has higher dispassion." These are the 2 types of detachment. The latter brings clarity of mind and pure discernment. So we want, you know, we will begin with perceiving the limitations and imperfections in the mind and world to gain our dispassion. But then we want to move on to filling the intellect with discriminating wisdom via devout practice. That will bring us the higher dispassion. It is very, very rewarding. It won't be about depriving ourselves, but realizing the nature of reality and who we really are. It reminds me of a quote, I think out of the Itihasa. A king said to a wandering sage who was visiting his court, he said, "Oh, sage, you are amazing. You look at all that you have renounced. I bow to you." And the sage looked at the king and said, "Oh, king, no, you are a greater renunciate than I have, because you have renounced existence, knowledge, bliss absolute for a kingdom and all the pleasures that it can give. You're the greater renunciate." So, on that note, Om Asato Ma Sadgamoya Tamaso Ma Jyotir Gamoya Mrichor Ma Amritam Gamoya Abhira Bhira Maedi Rudra Yate Dakshinam Mukam Tenamam Pahinichum. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Lead us from lower truth to higher truth. Lead us from darkness to light. Lead us from the unreal to the real. Lead us from the illusion of death to realization of eternal existence. Reach us through and through, O Lord and Mother of the universe, with thy sweet and benign presence. Om peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, and may peace be unto all living beings. Om Hari Om Hari Om Hari Om Tat Sat.